Hi everyone, this is a video for chapter 5.4, solving radical equations and inequalities. So the core concepts for solving radical equations is to isolate the radical on one side, and then you would raise one side of the equation to the same exponent to eliminate the radical and obtain a linear, quadratic, or other polynomial. And then you would solve the resulting equation using techniques we have learned in previous chapters. So for example 1, we're going to solve a radical equation. Radical 5x plus 1 equals 6. For step 1, you would square both sides, and you would get the radical eliminated to equal 5x plus 1 equals 36. And then you would subtract 1 from each side to get 5x equals 35. You divide by 5 on both sides, and then you would get x equals 7. And that's how you solve a radical. And then for example 2, we have solving an equation with an extraneous solution. Radical 44 minus 2x equals x minus 10. For step 1, you would square both sides again, and then that eliminates the radical. And then you would try to get 0 on one side, so you would subtract 44 and add 2x. And then you would get 0 equals x squared minus 18x plus 56. And then for step 3, you're going to want a factor. So you would get 0 equals x minus 14 and x equal x minus 4. And then for step 4, you would try to find the zeros. So it would be x minus 14. So you would add 14 to both sides. So you would get x equals 14. And then x minus 4, you'd add 4 to both sides to get x equals 4. And then to check to see which is an extraneous, you would just plug x back into the original equation. So radical 44 minus 2 times 14 equals 14 minus 10. So you'd get radical 16 equals 4, and 4 equals 4. So that's definitely a solution. And then you would check the other solution, which would be x equals 4. So you would put that back into the equation, and you would get radical 36 equals negative 6, but 6 does not equal negative 6, so therefore x equals 14 is the only solution, and x equals 4 is extraneous. So for example 3, we're going to solve an equation with two radicals. So for step 1, you would square both sides, and so that eliminates the radical. And so then you would subtract 3x and you would subtract 3x and you would add 8 to both sides and also subtract 1. And so you would get 2 radical 3x minus 8 equals negative 2x plus 12. And then you would divide both sides by 2 to eliminate the number before the radical. And so then that would leave you with radical 3x minus 8 equals negative x plus 6. Then you would square both sides again to eliminate the radical. And you would get 3x minus 8 equals x squared minus 12x plus 36. So you would subtract 3 and add 8 to both sides to get 0 equals x squared minus 15x plus 44. You would factor that to get x minus 11 and x minus 4. You would get the zeros for both, and so x would equal 11, and then x would also equal 4. So you're going to check for extraneous solutions here, and so when you put 11 back into the original equation, you find that it does not equal, 6 does not equal 4, so it's extraneous. But when you plug 4 back into the equation, you find that 3 equals 3, so x equals 4 is definitely a solution. So for the fourth example, we're going to solve an equation with a rational exponent. So it would be x to the 1/4 power plus 3 equals 0. So for step 1, you would subtract 3 from both sides to get x to the 1/4 power equals negative 3. And then for step 2, you would raise both to the 4th power because that is the reciprocal of 1/4. So you would get x equals 81. And then in example 5, we're going to solve a radical inequality. So for radical x minus 2 is greater than 20. So for step 1, you would divide both sides by 4 to get the number in front of the radical out. And step 2, you would square both sides to get x minus 2 is greater than 25. And then for step 3, you'd add 2 to both sides, and you'd get x is greater than 27. And so finally, for the real life problem, we have a problem that has to do with hurricanes. It says, in a hurricane, the mean sustained wind velocity in meters per second can be modeled by Vp equals 6.3 radical 1013 minus P, where P is the air pressure in millibars at the center of the hurricane. So we're going to estimate the air pressure of the hurricane when the mean sustained wind velocity is 54.5 meters per second. So the equation is Vp equals 6.3 radical 1013 minus P. So for step 1, you would insert 54.5 meters per second for V. And then for step 2, you would divide by 6.3 to get that number away from the front of the radical. And so you're left with 8.65 equals radical 1013 minus P. For step 3, you would square both sides to eliminate the radical, and you would get 74.8 equals 1013 minus P. So then, to isolate the variable, you subtract 1013 from both sides to get negative 938.2 equals negative P. But you can't have a negative variable, so you have to divide by negative 1 on both sides. And so then you would get P equals 938.2. So the air pressure is approximately 938 millibars because you would round. All right, well, good luck on finals.